Hi, my name's Kylie, and not long ago, my own brother slapped me in a car dealership because his payment didn't go through, and he didn't know I was the one funding it. You'd think that was the worst part. But no, it was the years before that, where I paid quietly, loved loudly, and stayed small so they could feel big. They drained my bank account, rewrote my role in our family story, and when I stopped playing along, they called me crazy, so I stopped being quiet. Now I wonder, how many families have their own version of Rhett, and how many Kylies are still paying the price in silence? I never imagined that a simple trip to a dealership on a bright afternoon would leave me with something far heavier than a car payment. I had walked into that showroom carrying nothing more than a folder of documents, and I walked out carrying the bruised weight of my own dignity. The late sun slanted across the freeway as Rhett drove, his black sedan gleaming in the light like a polished lie. He kept talking, the way he always did when he wanted to sound important, bragging about how he'd earned this, how he'd struggled for years, and was now finally living the reward. His words tumbled over themselves, confident, rehearsed, all designed for effect. I sat silently in the passenger seat, my eyes fixed on the blur of strip malls and fast food chains lining the streets of Irvine. His voice was background noise. What I noticed were the cars, rows of brand-new SUVs sparkling under the sun, their chrome reflecting back images of a life that felt entirely foreign to me. When we pulled into the sprawling auto mall, Rhett exited the car with an air of triumph, as though the entire lot had been arranged just for him. His shoes clicked on the pavement, leather polished, each step loud and certain. I followed at a quieter pace, clutching the slim folder against my chest. Inside were the papers he'd asked me to prepare. Bank statements, trade-in forms, pre-approval confirmations. I had spent nights checking every figure, double-checking dates and signatures. He hadn't even looked at them. He rarely did. Handling his business was expected of me. Gratitude was never part of the arrangement. The showroom itself was the kind of place designed to seduce people into debt. Polished marble floors reflected the ceiling lights like water. Sleek glass walls reached from floor to ceiling, showcasing the cars as though they were priceless art pieces instead of machines built for profit. Salespeople hovered in crisp suits, holding glossy brochures in one hand and bottled water in the other. The entire space hummed with practiced elegance. Rhett fit into it naturally. I, on the other hand, felt like a shadow, present, but transparent. Without hesitation, Rhett pointed at a silver SUV parked near the center, its rims catching the overhead light. "That one," he declared, his voice carrying authority. "I'll take that one." The salesman, a young man in a tailored jacket, nodded eagerly and began listing features: the heated leather seats, the lane assist technology, the panoramic sunroof. Rhett cut him off. "I want the full package," he said flatly, as if generosity toward himself were the only language he knew. The salesman's eyes flicked toward me for the briefest second, perhaps noticing the folder in my hand, perhaps sensing the tension in Rhett's tone. But before he could ask, Rhett gestured sharply. "My sister will handle the paperwork," he said, dismissing me as though I were an assistant. Handle had always been his code word for pay. He never said it outright, never used the word money, but everyone in the room understood what it meant. We moved to a glossy white counter where the contracts were printed, the numbers highlighted in neat columns. My eyes scanned them automatically, and then I saw it. A down payment figure inflated by several thousand. I lifted my pen and corrected it. The salesman looked startled. "Oh," he began, but Rhett's face hardened instantly. His jaw flexed. "You're messing up my deal," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to turn heads from across the room. Heat rose in my face, but I kept my pen steady. "I'm just fixing the number so it matches what I already paid," I said quietly. It should have ended there. It was a correction, nothing more. But Rhett was not a man who tolerated correction, especially not from me. The crack came fast and loud, his hand across my cheek. A slap. The sound echoed against the polished floors and glass walls, louder than any car horn outside. My head jerked slightly, my skin stung hot and red, but my body stayed rooted. Gasps scattered across the showroom. A couple near the coffee stand froze. A salesman at another desk looked away, pretending to shuffle papers. The silver SUV sat behind us, gleaming, indifferent, a silent witness to my humiliation. Rhett's glare burned into me. He raised his voice, making sure the room heard. "Stop acting like you own this place!" For a moment, the world shrank to the size of my burning cheek. My heart raced, but I didn't give him the tears he expected. I refused to let him mistake my pain for weakness. Instead, I looked back at him, silent, steady, unflinching. That slap wasn't about numbers on a page. It wasn't even about the car. It was about control. About reminding me of the role he had written for me. Silent facilitator, never equal, never seen. I gathered the folder under my arm and turned without a word. My heels clicked against the tile, each step echoing in the hushed room. The sales staff parted silently. Their eyes followed me, but none stepped forward. None spoke. The silver SUV glinted in my peripheral vision like a trophy that no longer mattered. Outside, the air hit cooler. The late sun had dropped lower, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. I opened the sedan door and slid into the passenger seat. The engine hummed faintly, a constant reminder of the machine that had carried me into this moment. My hands trembled in my lap. My mind screamed with betrayal, humiliation, disbelief. Rhett remained inside, his voice audible through the glass, arguing with the salesman, gesturing with broad strokes as though nothing had happened. He didn't even glance outside to check on me. I pulled my purse into my lap and reached for my phone. The cracked glass lit up, casting a pale glow on my hands. My thumb hovered over the banking app. The app where every transaction, every sacrifice, every payment I had made for him lived in cold, permanent numbers. For a moment, I considered it. One tap, and I could cancel. I could cut off the down payment. I could let the deal collapse under his arrogance. But my finger hesitated, because this moment wasn't just about dollars. It wasn't about financing or contracts. Something deeper had been struck inside me. Something that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with worth. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. The sting on my cheek was still hot, but beneath it, another fire burned. Maybe I wouldn't cancel today. Maybe I wouldn't make my move in that parking lot. But as I sat there, staring at the glow of the phone screen, I made myself a promise. The day I stop, he won't see it coming. I didn't cancel the payment that day, not right away. But I knew with certainty that the moment would come, and when it did, Rhett wouldn't see it coming. The ride back from the dealership was suffocating in its silence, a silence so thick it felt alive, pressing against my ribcage like an invisible weight. Rhett filled the air with his chatter, oblivious to what sat heavy inside me. He bragged about the packages he'd chosen, about how the rims caught the light just right, about the leather interior he deserved after all those hard years. He listed features I hadn't bothered to memorize, colors I'd picked weeks ago on his behalf when he sent me late-night screenshots with the words, "Handle it." I heard none of it. All I heard was the slap, over and over again. The sharp crack, the sting against my cheek, the laughter in the background of the showroom, the way my own body froze with the humiliation of a child caught in a lie she never told. I replayed it like a broken record, the sting, the shock, the shame. But the deeper wound wasn't the physical strike. It was the years it represented. Years of my silence, of my sacrifices that became invisible the moment they were made. The freeway stretched ahead in streaks of orange and mauve, the sun sinking lower as if retreating with me. I merged into traffic, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. A radio station hummed through the speakers, a song about heartbreak, not mine, but someone else's, and it bled into the background like a cruel reminder that the world didn't stop when I hurt. By the time I pulled off Culver Boulevard and into the driveway of my modest apartment complex, the sky had already darkened. The lamps flickered on, halos of weak yellow against the evening air. The smell of jasmine drifted in soft waves from the shrubs near the stairwell, mixing with the faint hum of the freeway in the distance. I climbed the steps to my small two-bedroom unit and unlocked the door. The apartment greeted me with its familiar stillness, the faint buzz of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock. I set the leather folder on the counter with more force than I intended, slipped off my scarf, and walked to the kitchen. My hand reached for the bottle of Merlot I'd been saving. I poured a glass, its dark surface catching the low lamplight, and carried it to the window overlooking the glowing grid of streetlights below. I sat there in the quiet and let the memories surface. I thought of the nights Rhett had crashed here after his divorce, his shoes abandoned by the door, his voice filling my kitchen as he complained about lawyers and settlements. He'd slept on my couch for weeks, sometimes even in my bed when he felt too broken to be alone. I cooked for him, covered his bills, let him heal at my expense. Not once did he say thank you. Gratitude was a foreign language to him. I thought of Vera, standing smugly at family gatherings, boasting to anyone who would listen about how she paid her own way through college. Nobody knew, or maybe nobody cared, that I had co-signed those loan documents so she could even qualify. I thought of Mom's hospital bills, of the quiet deliveries of groceries I left at their doors when money was tight, of the rent payments I slipped into Rhett's account when his checks didn't clear. No one asked, no one credited. It was just expected. I looked down at my phone. The family group chat blinked with new notifications. Rhett bragging about his big day, Vera posting pictures from brunch, everyone laughing at inside jokes. Not one message asked how I was. Not one acknowledged what had happened in that showroom. The silence was worse than the slap itself. My fingers hovered, not over the banking app this time, but over the email icon. I opened a blank draft. My thumbs typed words not to them, but to myself, as if speaking to the woman inside me who had been silenced too long. You deserve better. You deserve to be seen. The words sat there, glowing against the screen. I didn't hit send. Instead, I closed the app and opened my laptop. I pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been keeping for years, the one I never mentioned out loud. A record of every transaction, every favor, every bill I covered when they promised to pay me back. Line after line appeared, cold and unfeeling. The down payment on Rhett's condo, the months of utilities I covered, the medical bills, the interest on loans I had taken in my name so theirs could stay clean. I added today's number, the SUV. My eyes stung, not from the glow of the screen, but from the recognition that these numbers told a story more honest than any memory could. When I finished, I saved the file under a new name, the truth they never asked for. LSX. I leaned back in my chair. The weight of it pressed against me, but it wasn't the crushing kind. It was grounding. That document wasn't just numbers anymore. It was proof. It was the history they'd erased, written back in my hand. Late into the night, I sat awake at the edge of my bed, the glow of my laptop still casting light across the sheets. I opened a draft email again, this time with a subject line typed in bold letters. Financial Accounting of Invisible Labor. I stared at it for long minutes. My finger hovered over send. My breath slowed, my heart clenched, but I didn't click. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about pressing send. It wasn't even about forcing them to see the numbers. It was about me refusing to stay erased. It was about building the strength to let them choke on silence until I was ready to break it on my own terms. Eventually, I closed the laptop. I walked back to the window, the Merlot untouched now, and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Below me, Irving stretched out in an orderly sprawl of streetlights, cars gliding down Culver like lines of fire. My reflection in the glass stared back, cheeks still faintly red, eyes rimmed with fatigue but bright with something new. Resolve. I whispered it aloud, just to myself. No more. The night pressed quiet against the pane, but I didn't feel invisible anymore. Somewhere deep in my chest, a flicker had sparked into flame. I would reclaim my voice. Quietly. Decisively. And when the moment came to make them see, I'd be ready. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with that file yet, but I knew one thing. It was power. Not the kind of power you flaunt or shout about, but the quiet kind, the kind that sits in your bones and makes you breathe differently. 2 mornings later, I sat at my little kitchen table, sunlight filtering through the blinds in narrow slats. Dust motes hung in the air like tiny sparks, catching gold in the morning light. My laptop sat open in front of me. On the screen glowed the spreadsheet I'd created, the one I'd stayed up past midnight refining, line by line. The rows were color-coded now, each shade marking a different kind of sacrifice. Blue for rent payments I covered, green for medical bills, yellow for temporary loans that were never returned, red for the big things, the car down payment, the condo deposit, the debts I had swallowed so they could save face. Next to each number, I'd type notes, dates, vendors, reference codes, bank statements. The more I added, the more I realized how consistent it all was. Every transaction was like a stitch in fabric. Every bill paid, every emergency covered, every invisible favor. Together, they formed the hidden lining of my family's story. My contributions weren't luxuries. They were the threads holding everything together. And yet, no one ever said my name. When I drove to work, my chest felt heavier than the traffic pressing around me. Each mile down the freeway hummed like a question I didn't want to answer yet. My mind kept replaying the dealership, the sting of Rhett's hand across my cheek, the silence of strangers, the laughter that should have died in their throats, but didn't. By the time I parked at the office, I had already promised myself, this wasn't just about that slap anymore. This was about everything it symbolized. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. My colleague June stood by the break room, stirring sugar into her coffee. She glanced at me as I walked by, her brow creased. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay? You seem quiet today." I forced a small smile, lifted my hand in a half wave. "I'm fine." The words came out too quick, too practiced. She nodded, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes. She knew better. Still, I kept walking. There was no way to explain, not yet. Later that afternoon, as I stared blankly at my monitor, my phone buzzed. Vera's name lit up the screen. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then opened her text. "Rhett says you overreacted. You know how emotional you get. Maybe just apologize?" It was like muscle memory. The sting of old gaslighting wrapped in concern. A familiar chorus. "You feel too much. You act too bold. You embarrass us with your emotions." I stared at her words. For the first time, I felt no urge to argue, no rush to defend. Only clarity. Cold, steady clarity. I typed back, "Tell Rhett the bill for his car down payment is attached." I hit send. Then I attached a PDF of my bank statement, the one showing the exact date and amount of the transfer. No explanation, no apology, no plea for understanding. Just numbers, the kind that couldn't be erased or rewritten. Truth in black and white. When I left work early that day, the air outside felt sharper, almost electric against my skin. I drove home, parked, and immediately started pulling open drawers. I dug through old notebooks, boxes of receipts, scraps of paper I'd shoved away through the years. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything resurfacing. That's when I found it, the battered leather journal I'd carried years ago during my worst seasons. I flipped it open. Inside were pages filled with half-legible handwriting, entries written on nights when the pressure was too much to hold inside. I skimmed through the lists, the doctor's appointments I scheduled for Mom, the groceries I bought for Vera, the rent I paid when her account bounced, the $6,000 I handed Rhett during his divorce with the promise, never kept, that he'd pay me back. Each line was a reminder of how often I had chosen silence over confrontation. I sat back, tears blurring the ink. This wasn't just a journal, it was a ledger of invisible labor. A history of service I had quietly convinced myself didn't matter until now. The sun dipped low, and dusk painted the room in muted amber. I reached for a framed photo on the shelf, a family beach trip from years ago. Everyone was laughing, smiling in sunlight. But when I looked closer, I noticed myself again, standing at the edge, half cropped out, only part of my face visible. I had been pushed to the margins even in photographs. I pressed my fingers against the glass, trembling. Behind me, my laptop still glowed with the open spreadsheet. I clicked into a new email. My subject line read, "Since you won't ask, here's what you never saw." I attached the spreadsheet. I scanned a few of the journal pages and attached those too. The evidence was raw, human, undeniable. My cursor hovered over send, but I didn't press it, not yet. This wasn't about rage or impulse. It was about weight, about timing, about making sure that when the truth landed, it landed with impact. I closed the laptop slowly, gently, like I was placing a lid on something simmering. I opened the window and breathed in the cool night air. the scent of jasmine mixed with the faint growl of traffic. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a reminder that life went on, indifferent to my storm. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding that family photo in one hand, the journal open beside me. The lamp cast soft shadows across the pages. I whispered, not as a question, but as a vow. I will not let this be invisible any longer. The night held my words, and for the first time, I believed them. The smell of grilled hot dogs and corn on the cob drifted through the humid summer air as I pushed open the gate to my mother's backyard. The sound of family chatter mixed with children's laughter. An ordinary suburban Saturday scene, the kind that should have felt familiar and comforting. But to me, it was a minefield waiting to explode. For one fleeting second, I considered turning back, retreating to the safety of my car. But then I pressed my palms against the cool iron of the gate, steadied my breath, and stepped inside. The yard was strung with twinkling lights, paper lanterns swaying in the warm breeze. Cousins and neighbors milled around plastic tables covered in checkered cloths. My mother floated among them like the hostess of a perfect picture, her smile stretched too wide, her eyes darting nervously as if scanning for cracks in the performance. By the grill stood Rhett, spatula in one hand, beer in the other. He flipped burgers with exaggerated flair, his voice booming with confidence, shoulders squared like the patriarch he thought he was. Laughter erupted from the circle around him, people clapping him on the back. He looked untouchable, radiant in the glow of borrowed pride. Vera sat at a table near the patio, sunglasses perched on her head, waving me over with the same breezy charm she'd used all her life to cover cruelty. "Hey, sis," she called, her voice sweet and sharp all at once, as though nothing had ever happened. As though we hadn't spoken words that cut so deep they left scars. Their ease stabbed me more than confrontation could have. To them, everything was fine. To them, I was still the supporting character, expected to show up, play my role, swallow the bitterness, and keep quiet. I slipped through the crowd with polite nods and half smiles, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing my hesitation. I found a seat beneath the oak tree, its branches stretched wide like an umbrella over a faded picnic table. From there, I watched. The sun was beginning to tilt toward evening, the light softer, the shadows longer. I folded my hands around the strap of my purse. Inside was my small notebook, and on my phone, the file, the record of every debt, every favor, every invisible sacrifice. I had brought it like armor, even if I wasn't sure yet how to wield it. For a while, the noise of casual conversations about weather and weekend plans swirled around me like a foreign language. My pulse kept its own rhythm, beating faster with every second Rhett stood just a few yards away, laughing like a man with nothing to answer for. Finally, he excused himself from the group at the grill, set the spatula aside, and walked toward me. His face was calm at first, but his eyes burned, his voice carrying an edge brittle enough to snap. "You embarrassed me in front of the dealership staff," he said, his words clipped. "What the hell is wrong with you?" The chatter around us faltered. Chairs squeaked as people shifted. Even the kids seemed to pause mid-play. The tension spread like a silent alarm. I met his gaze. My throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. "I was paying for that car, Rhett." He laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "Oh, come on. You're just jealous because I finally have something nice." His words dripped with mockery, crafted for an audience. Humiliation pricked at me, sharp as glass. But I didn't flinch. I curled my fingers tighter around my purse strap and looked him squarely in the eye. "Then pay for it yourself," I said, calm, deliberate. "I'm done being your nice thing." His jaw clenched. A flush crept across his neck. He wanted me broken. He wanted me to crumble in front of everyone so he could stand taller. Instead, I gave him nothing but the truth. "You always think you're so high and mighty," he barked, louder now, so the whole yard could hear. "You ruin everything with your drama." His words rang across the tables like a sermon. Then, with a violent jerk, he turned on his heel. He stormed toward the trash bin, hurling his beer can inside so hard the metal rattled. Guests murmured in uneasy ripples, voices buzzing like flies. A few cousins whispered behind their hands. Vera rose from her seat, sliding her sunglasses into her hair, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Kylie, let's calm down. This is family." Her tone was rehearsed, honeyed for the audience, but as she drew closer, she bent just enough to let her whisper cut the air between us. "Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, we'd include you more." Her words struck cold against my skin. That was her judgment. Dismissal disguised as advice, cruelty disguised as care. My heart thudded. My mouth burned with words I could have unleashed, words that would scorch every illusion they clung to. But I bit them back. I refused to waste them on ears that only wanted my silence. I stood. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and walked away from the picnic tables. Behind me, I heard gasps, the shifting of chairs, the low mutters of people unsettled by what they didn't understand. But I didn't falter. Each step felt heavier, but it was also a release. Dignity weighed less than humiliation. At the driveway, I reached my car. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door and slid inside. I shut it firmly, letting the hum of the air conditioner drown the faint echo of laughter and murmurs from the backyard. My chest rose and fell in ragged rhythm, my cheeks still remembering the sting of his slap days earlier, my ears still hearing Vera's venom. I pulled my phone from my bag. The draft email I'd written, the one attaching the spreadsheet, the ledger of every hidden sacrifice, still sat there in my outbox. I stared at it for a long moment, then pressed delete. Not because I was afraid, not because they didn't deserve to see it, but because that wasn't how the truth deserved to be revealed. Not in a half-angry email they could dismiss as hysteria. Instead, I opened the Notes app. I created a new file, typed a title, Statement of Intent to File Small Claims, Family Loan Unpaid Debts. The words looked stark against the blank screen. My thumb hovered over Save. I didn't type anything else, not yet. But I locked the folder, my heart pounding with certainty. I leaned back against the headrest, eyes on the windshield. The barbecue voices carried faintly through the air, blurred by distance and glass. The sky above me was darkening into twilight, streaks of lavender and deep blue stretching over the neighborhood. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked steadier than I felt. For years, I'd been cast as the caretaker, the silent fixer, the background character in their story. But now, as the summer night settled in and cicadas began their song, I felt a spring coil tight inside me. If claiming my place meant being painted as the villain, then so be it, because villains at least are remembered. And the moment I typed that single line, everything in me shifted. The moment I typed that line, Statement of Intent, I knew there was no turning back. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The fear that had kept me silent for years was thinning, like fog burned away by morning sun. When dawn crept in, soft light filtered through my curtains, painting faint stripes across the wall. The world outside was quiet, but my mind buzzed with restless electricity. I swung my legs out of bed and felt the cool floor steady me. My laptop sat on the desk, lid still half open, glowing faintly. I pulled it closer, printed the draft document I had written the night before, and spread the pages across my kitchen table. Line by line, I read it again. Rent payments, utility bills, grocery receipts, car down payments, medical contributions. I wasn't reading numbers. I was rereading my life in ledger form. It wasn't a tantrum, wasn't a threat, wasn't a cry for attention. It was evidence. It was boundary. It was truth carved into ink and paper. My phone buzzed, startling me. The screen lit up with a single name. Mom. For a moment, I froze, thumb hovering. I considered letting it ring out, but some instinct made me press accept. Her voice came through clipped and urgent. Kylie, come over. We need to talk. No warmth, no hesitation, just demand. I swallowed hard. When? Today. Before this goes any further. She didn't even try to hide what she meant. The this was me daring to break the script. I ended the call, slipped into the bathroom, and washed my face. I buttoned a crisp blouse, tucked it into dark jeans, and tied my hair back. My reflection in the mirror looked steadier than I felt. By the time I slid into my car, the horizon was stretching with streaks of pastel orange. The freeway lay quiet beneath me, my thoughts noisier than the hum of tires on asphalt. Was she going to beg me to stop, scold me into compliance, or demand I retract every step toward self-respect? By early evening, I pulled into my parents' long driveway. The familiar scent of warm pavement mixed with the faint perfume of orange blossoms drifting from the garden. My chest tightened with memory. Birthday parties, family dinners, Sunday afternoons, but the house in front of me felt like enemy territory now. I rang the bell. The door opened almost instantly, as if they'd been waiting behind it. The foyer light glowed soft, but no warmth radiated from within. No hugs, no small talk. Inside, the living room felt staged, like a courtroom disguised as a parlor. The beige couch and framed portraits didn't soften the atmosphere. Mom sat upright, ankles crossed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dad leaned back in his armchair, arms folded over his chest, jaw set like stone. Rhett stood near the window, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders squared with defiance. Vera perched on the edge of a chair, legs crossed, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched until Mom broke it. Her voice, calm but sharp, sliced the air. Why are you threatening legal action against your own family? I closed the door behind me and exhaled, slow but steady. Because I don't owe you silence anymore. My fingers tightened around the folder I carried. I stepped forward, laid the printed documents on the coffee table, and fanned them out so no one could claim ignorance. These are the numbers: rent, utilities, medical bills, car down payments, every line I paid while you treated me like I was disposable. I tapped the paper with my finger. This isn't fantasy. This isn't exaggeration. These are my hands, my labor, my money. Rhett rolled his eyes, leaning against the wall. Nobody asked you to do it, he muttered. You chose to. That's on you. I turned to him, my voice sharp but not raised. I chose silence. I chose to keep the peace. But you mistook silence for consent. You mistook dignity for weakness. I don't owe you that anymore. The room tightened. The air seemed to thicken around us. Mom leaned forward, her face pale, her voice trembling as though she still believed her words could guilt me back into submission. We raised you. We loved you. How can you treat us like enemies? I steadied my breath. Love isn't a ledger you use to collect favors. Love isn't a bill you waive when you want obedience. You don't owe me money, I said, pressing my palm against the stack of papers. But you owe me respect, and you haven't given me that in years. The words hung heavy. Dad shifted in his chair but said nothing. His eyes flicked away, unable or unwilling to meet mine. Vera's cheeks flushed pink. She kept her gaze low, caught between guilt and silence. No one spoke further. The quiet pressed so hard against me that my ears rang with it. I straightened, gathered my folder back into my arms, and walked toward the door. Rhett followed, his footsteps heavy in the foyer. He leaned close, his voice low but venomous. You think you've won something here? I paused, hand on the doorknob, and turned just enough to meet his glare. My spine stayed straight, my voice calm. I've won my freedom. His eyes narrowed, fury tightening his jaw. You won't get far, he hissed. You'll regret this. I opened the door and stepped into the cool evening air. The sky was darkening, streaked with purple and gold, street lamps flickering to life one by one along the road. My heart pounded against my ribs, not with fear, but with adrenaline, with the echo of years I'd wasted swallowing my words. I slid into my car, shut the door, and sat for a long moment, my hands gripping the wheel. Through the windshield, the house loomed, familiar and foreign all at once. I thought of the silence inside, of the years I had spent trying to earn their approval, and for the first time, I didn't ache for it. I didn't know how far I'd get, emotionally or legally, but as I started the engine and pulled away, one truth anchored me like never before. For the first time in my life, the road ahead belonged to me. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, clicking keyboards, phones ringing, the faint hum of fluorescent tubes above. I sat at my desk, trying to finish an email draft when my phone vibrated sharply against the wood. Once, then twice, Then a constant staccato buzz, notifications spilled across the lock screen like dominoes, declined transactions, alerts from my bank. Payment declined, over and over again, each one a knife twisting deeper. My stomach dropped before I even opened the first text. I didn't need to. I knew. It was Rhett. Heat climbed up my neck. The realization landed heavy. He'd tried to run my card, maybe multiple times. He wasn't just entitled anymore. He was escalating. My pulse thundered in my ears. I grabbed my purse and laptop, rose too abruptly. My chair scraped against the carpet. A few colleagues looked up, startled. June called softly after me. "Everything okay?" I muttered something about a personal emergency and rushed out, leaving a half-finished email blinking on my screen. The drive felt endless. My knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. The freeway lights blurred, red and gold streaks across the windshield. My mind roared with questions, looping like static. How dare he? Why now? Why this public, reckless move? By the time I pulled into the dealership lot, dusk had thickened. The last of the sun bled into the horizon. Inside the glass walls, the showroom glowed artificially bright. Cars lined up like trophies, chrome polished to a mirror sheen. Through the glass, I saw Rhett. He was in mid-argument with the floor manager, gesturing wildly. His shoulders were squared, his face red. The manager stood stiff, holding a payment terminal like it might explode. Rhett's voice carried even through the glass, sharp and ugly. When I stepped through the door, heads turned. Rhett spun, his eyes locking on me. For a split second, shock flashed across his features, then fury. He marched toward me, words spitting out like venom. "You embarrassed me in front of them? You think this is funny?" Before I could even answer, his hand struck, hard. The crack of palm against cheek echoed through the glassy showroom. Silence dropped like a curtain. Sales staff froze mid-step. One receptionist pressed her hand to her mouth. The chrome of the SUV reflected it all back at me, the glint of overhead lights, my face reddening where the slap landed. But I didn't stumble. I didn't cry. My chest burned, but I locked my gaze on his. My voice came steady, clear enough for everyone to hear. "You stole from me. You lied to me. And now, you touched me." The manager moved forward, beads of sweat on his brow. "Sir," he said tightly, "we can't tolerate violence here." Rhett snapped his head toward him. "It's a family matter. She's my sister." His tone softened, as though that excused it. "Don't make this bigger than it is." I shook my head slowly. My voice rose just enough to pierce the tension. "And I'm pressing charges." Gasps rippled. The receptionist whispered something to another associate. A mechanic, halfway through a test drive prep, stopped in his tracks. Rhett stiffened. Color drained from his face under the harsh fluorescent lights. He glanced at the manager, at the staff, at the cluster of curious eyes now fixed on him. He had always been the loudest in the room, the one who commanded attention, but here he looked cornered. The manager reached for the desk phone. "Security, please." His voice shook, but his grip on the receiver was steady. I stood still, my cheek still burning, but my spine straight. I didn't look at Rhett again. I turned and walked toward the glass doors, each step deliberate, each echo louder than the last. Outside, night had fully swallowed the city. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and jasmine from a nearby planter. I slid into my car, hands trembling, and sat in silence before starting the engine. My reflection in the windshield was strange, part wounded, part resolute. Later, at home, I sat at my dining table with my laptop open. The glow of the screen lit the small room. I filled out the official online complaint form, date, time, incident description. My hands shook as I typed, but my resolve didn't. I hit submit. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Vera. A single line lit up the screen. "He's not thinking straight. Please don't let it go to court." I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I typed back. "I already did let it go. For too long." Silence followed. But the silence didn't last long. By nightfall, the first Facebook post appeared in a local community group, a grainy clip from the dealership's security camera. It showed Rhett's hand connecting with my face, just clear enough to recognize us both. The caption read, "Sibling dispute at local showroom. Sister claims assault. My stomach dropped. It was out there now. Not just in the private shadows of family, but public, permanent. The comments came quickly. Some were sympathetic. Nobody deserves that. Good for her if she presses charges. Others were cruel, doubting, probably staged for money. Families fight. Why make it public? Rhett texted me not long after, words sharp and rattled. You're destroying everything. You'll regret this. I set the phone down on the table, screen dark. My chest rose and fell with a deep breath. He was wrong. This wasn't destruction. This wasn't me breaking the family. This was the first step toward truth. The video hadn't even cooled online before the wildfire began. By dawn the next morning, my phone was a pulsing, burning weight in my pocket. Notifications poured in like sparks, angry comments, whispers disguised as questions, outright attacks dressed as truth. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I scrolled with shaking fingers. The glow of the screen lit my tired face in the early gray light. Words blurred together. She's mentally unstable. Always the family victim. Who really paid for what? Each one sliced deeper than the last, not because I believed them, but because the repetition made them feel like an echo chamber determined to drown me out. I thought of June, my coworker, who had quietly asked just last week, "Hey, you okay? You've seemed off lately." At the time, I had brushed it aside, forcing a smile. But now? This was beyond okay. This was a battle for my name, my sanity, my very existence in the story being told. At 10 o'clock, my boss called me into his office. He closed the door gently, like he was sealing me inside a confessional. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in pale stripes of light. He gestured toward the monitor on his desk, face heavy with concern. There it was, Rhett's edited video. He had taken the dealership footage and cut it like a propaganda reel. My corrections, my calm insistence on accuracy, all gone. Instead, the clip highlighted him raising his voice, me standing tense, and then my departure. The caption in bold letters. My sister's meltdown after her payment failed. She's not dependable. The bile in my throat rose so fast I thought I might choke. I could almost hear Rhett's smug voice narrating it in my head. My boss turned to me, expression torn. "Kylie, I want you to know, I believe you. I saw the original, I've read the report, but..." He hesitated. "HR is worried. This is becoming a public relations issue for the company. Clients Google names. They see stories. They don't always dig for the truth." I nodded, too tightly, my voice a thin thread. "I know." By lunchtime, the smear campaign had spread like oil across water. Screenshots of forged texts began circulating online, doctored messages that made it look like I had demanded money from Rhett. Anonymous emails surfaced, claiming I siphoned funds from family accounts. And the most cutting blow, a former co-worker's anonymous comment on a forum. She always acted like a victim to get attention. Nothing new. Neighbors who used to wave when I walked by now crossed the street, clutching their grocery bags tighter. A mother who often greeted me at the mailbox kept her eyes on the ground as though my presence might infect her. The invisibility I had once feared was now replaced with something worse, visibility tainted by shame I hadn't earned. That evening, back in my small Irvine apartment, I drew the blinds closed. The golden California dusk bled through the cracks but couldn't warm the space. My lamps cast weak halos of light that made the silence heavier. I sat at my dining table, my phone in one hand, staring at the screen until the words blurred with tears I refused to shed. What if this is who I've become? Angry, isolated, rejected. My reflection in the darkened window looked like a stranger, eyes hollow, lips pressed thin. And then, like a rope thrown across a raging current, my voicemail light blinked. A message from my aunt in Oregon. I pressed play, and her voice, steady, familiar, wrapped in years of unconditional love, filled the room. "Kylie," she said softly, "I saw the clip. I know the truth. Don't let him rewrite your story. Stay strong. You've always had more strength than you realize." The tears I had held back finally welled. My throat tightened, my chest squeezed. But this time it wasn't despair. It was relief. Someone, even just one person, believed me without question. Not long after, Vera's text arrived. Short, clipped, frantic. He's spiraling. People believe him now. You need to respond. I stared at it for a long moment. She hadn't defended me before. She hadn't stopped him at the BBQ, hadn't called after the dealership. And now, suddenly, urgency. Not for me, for the family name. I typed back one line. I already am. That night, as the world outside settled into quiet, I pulled my laptop closer. The blue-white glow washed over the room, over my tired hands, over the printouts still scattered on the table. My heart pounded with the weight of decision. I opened a new video file. No filters, no rehearsals, no spin. Just me. My hair unstyled, my voice raw. I began by showing bank receipts, line after line of deposits I had made for Rhett's condo, for Vera's tuition, for groceries, for medical bills. Then I showed the dealership deposit, the date, the signature. Finally, I played the unedited audio clip from the security system, the one I had managed to download before Rhett's edit spread. The sound was tinny, but undeniable. Rhett's voice, sharp, my quiet corrections, and then, the slap, that single, shocking sound frozen in time, the echo that no amount of spin could erase. I looked into the camera and ended with one sentence. He says I'm mentally unstable. But tell me this, who pays and then gets slapped? Who holds the truth in silence? My finger hovered for a breathless second, then pressed upload. The bar moved slowly, agonizingly, but at last it ticked to completion. Within minutes, the share count climbed, first dozens, then hundreds. The comments came fast. Finally, she spoke. The original audio, he's been lying this whole time. Stay strong, we see you. I exhaled for the first time in days. The silence around me didn't vanish, but it shifted, no longer oppressive. It crackled with possibility. This was not the end. I knew Rhett would retaliate. I knew more lies would come, more whispers, more character assassinations. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something I had fought for my whole life, being heard. The views climbed faster than I could refresh. And the comments? They weren't what I expected. By the time twilight turned the sky to deep indigo, my video had surpassed 1 million views. Notifications erupted, messages of support, accusations pushed aside, people reposting, tagging friends. I sat in my apartment, overwhelmed, yet strangely calm. My phone rang, local news. A reporter introduced herself. Miss Kylie, your story is national now. I'd like an interview. I agreed, voice firm. That night, I read the transcript of my video's audio, my own voice, recorded moments earlier. My fingers trembled just slightly. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' house under a sinking sun. The evening was scheduled for what they called a family mediation dinner. They expected compliance. They didn't expect confrontation. I walked into the dining room, receipts in hand, car payment confirmations, bank statements, notes from that journal. Rhett's face flickered when he saw me. He forced a polite smile. Look who decided to show up. I didn't hesitate. I laid each paper on the polished wood table. I exposed his lies, how he claimed credit, omitted transactions, silenced me when it suited him. I played the unedited audio of the slap. I said flatly, "You go online again, you answer in court." The room gasped. Vera stood, voice trembling. She's right. I've known for months. I was too scared to say it. Her confession rattled everyone. Rhett shouted, "You're turning them against me!" A cousin, her voice calm but firm. "No, you turned them against you." My father, rarely one to speak. "You've shamed this family, Rhett. I raised you better." He sounded pained, disappointed, decidedly final. My hand shook as I gathered my things. Then Rhett barked, "Without me, you're nothing!" I paused, turning, voice low. "Funny? That's exactly what I am. Without you." I walked out. I passed stunned relatives, whispered gasps. Outside, the night air felt sharp and free. My phone buzzed again. Text message. We'd like to offer you a speaking slot at our Women's Empowerment panel next month. Your voice matters. I stared at it. I walked to my car, slid in. I exhaled hard, tears prickling, not from sorrow, but from release. The weight of being unseen was lifting. I pressed start and drove away from the house, from him, toward a new horizon. The messages had stopped. The clips had quieted. My video survived the wild storm that Rhett tried to brew. In the long hours after that dinner, I sat by the window, waiting. The darkness outside settled like a promise. Change was coming. I woke the next morning to silence. My phone lit up. Not with attacks, but muted notifications. Rhett was gone from the family group chat. No posts, no explanations. His name wasn't spoken at home. The absence felt heavier than any argument. Later that day, Vera showed up at my door. She held an old photo album cradled in her arms. I invited her in. She sat on the couch, flipping through pages. Childhood summers, sandcastles, laughter. She paused on a photo of us at our grandmother's porch. She looked at me and said softly, "I think maybe we forgot who you really were." I watched her face struggle with emotions. I replied steady, "Or maybe you just never wanted to see it." A few days later, a letter arrived at my apartment, handwritten, thick paper. The return address, Aunt Carol. I recognized her careful slant of handwriting immediately. My mother's sister, who often phoned quietly when nobody else would listen. The letter read, "You've done what the rest of us never could. You stood up and didn't back down. Your voice matters. Will you speak for others who've been silenced?" At the bottom, an invitation. Speak at a small church meeting on financial abuse in families. I stared at the words, heart tight. My mouth went dry. The night of the panel, I arrived early to the community center. The walls smelled of pews, varnish, and candle wax. A few chairs filled with neighbors, women I'd never met. I stepped to the podium, hands trembling. I thought of Rhett, of Vera, of those nights I sat quietly in the dark. I cleared my throat. Family doesn't mean surrender. Kindness is not currency, and silence is not love. I spoke of my story, of payments, debts, slaps, erasure. A woman in the front row whispered, "You just told my story out loud." Others nodded, tears glinting in their eyes. Afterward, organizers approached me. "Would you mentor women about boundaries? Help them reclaim their finances?" I swallowed. They offered me a part-time role. I nodded, voice soft. This was new territory, but wanted territory. Back in my apartment, it felt lighter. I rearranged furniture, set potted plants by windows, opened blinds. Sunlight streamed, making dust motes dance. I budgeted for a short getaway. Just me and a cabin by the sea. Rumors drifted. Rhett had moved out of state. His name appeared in online rumor mills, his reputation tarnished. Some said he had to sell the car. No charges filed publicly, but the echo of truth followed him. One afternoon, months later, Vera texted, "Thank you for being brave, even when we weren't." My thumb hovered over the reply. I typed, "I hope you find your own courage too." Then hit send. That night, I sat at my desk, journal open, lamp casting warm light. I wrote, "They took so much from me, time, money, peace, but they didn't steal me." And I smiled. Not a big smile, but a soft one. A quiet assertion. And that is something I'll never give again without love. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But the real power isn't in holding on. It's in knowing when to let go. What would you do if your own family treated you like a paycheck instead of a person? If this story made you feel seen or reminded you of your own experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that reveal what really happens behind closed doors.